3:44 a.m. The Korean Demilitarized Zone, 2 miles south of the military demarcation line. The pre-dawn darkness absolute, no moon, overcast sky. The temperature at 19 degrees Fahrenheit, a dry cold that turned every breath visible and made the scrub pine ridgeline to the north look like a black wall against a slightly less black sky. The silence complete, except for the wind moving through the tree line and the distant, barely audible sound of a river moving over its stones somewhere to the west. MH-60M Black Hawk Reaper 22 was running at 40 feet above the ridgeline, lights out, sensors active. Her 2-pilot crew and 6-man special reconnaissance team navigating entirely by NVGs and the thermal feed from the aircraft's FLIR turret. She had launched from Camp Humphreys 81 minutes earlier on a classified SR mission, special reconnaissance of a North Korean engineering activity that imagery analysis had flagged 3 days earlier at a site 400 meters north of the military demarcation line. The specific question requiring ground truth reconnaissance: whether the KPA was emplacing a new artillery forward observer position in a terrain feature that the Combined Forces Command's firing solution database had not previously included. The mission was a standard short infiltration SR. Cross the MDL at low altitude in a terrain masking profile. Hold south of the forward observer site. Deploy the 6-man team for a 2-hour observation window. Exfiltrate before first light. The team comprised 8 personnel total, 2 161st SOAR pilots, 6 operators from 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Force, experienced in exactly this type of short-duration cross-MDL reconnaissance task, carrying full SR loadout, including comm equipment, night observation devices, and the personal protective weapon standard for a team that was emphatically not looking for a fight. At 3:44 a.m., Reaper 22's left engine absorbed a burst from a ZU-23-2 anti-aircraft autocannon emplaced in a prepared firing position on the ridgeline below and to the left of her approach route. The burst, a sequence of 7 23mm rounds fired by a crew that had been in position since 11 p.m. the previous night, waiting, struck the engine nacelle, the main rotor mast fairing, and the tail boom, in a pattern consistent with a pre-planned engagement rather than a reactive contact. The left engine immediately lost power. The main rotor RPM dropped below controllable threshold within 4 seconds. The aircraft commander executed an emergency auto-rotation into a small clearing 140 meters south of the ridgeline. Reaper 22 hit the clearing at 3:44 a.m. and 31 seconds. Skidding 60 meters across the frozen ground before the tail boom contacted a tree line and stopped the forward movement. The aircraft was inoperable on contact. Both pilots sustained injuries consistent with the impact. The aircraft commander a fractured left wrist from the collective impact. The co-pilot a laceration across his forehead from the instrument panel. Neither was incapacitated. The 6 Delta operators egressed the aircraft within 12 seconds of the hard landing, establishing a defensive perimeter around the wreck. They were at that moment on the South Korean side of the military demarcation line, 140 meters south. The KPA element that had emplaced the ZU-23-2 and had been waiting for exactly this mission was already moving through the tree line toward the clearing. They were not an improvised reaction force. They were a prepared seizure team, 40 KPA Special Operations personnel in 4-man fire teams, moving to pre-planned approach routes toward the crash site, equipped with the knowledge that a US aviation asset operating at the time and route that Reaper 22 was using would follow the standard terrain masking profile directly over the ridgeline firing position. The operation had been planned by KPA Reconnaissance General Bureau operators who had spent 31 days observing the pattern of US Special Reconnaissance missions in this specific corridor. They had identified the mission timing, the aircraft profile, and the approach route with sufficient confidence to emplace a prepared engagement position and a seizure force large enough to overwhelm any reasonable ground element they expected to find. The strategic purpose was not tactical. It was political. The capture of 8 United States military personnel, including Delta Force operators on or near North Korean territory, to be paraded before the world's media as evidence of American aggression and used as political leverage of the most consequential kind. In Pyongyang, the supreme leader had approved the operation 72 hours earlier. The seizure of 8 American Special Operations personnel was assessed as producing a crisis that would paralyze the American decision-making apparatus. A captured personnel crisis involving elite military operators in a DMZ environment where the use of military force to recover them carried risk of igniting a broader conflict on the peninsula. The KPA's assessment was that the United States would negotiate, that it would trade, concede, and accommodate to recover its personnel, that the leverage of 8 American special operators in DPRK custody would accomplish in days what decades of nuclear development had not. A direct, high-stakes negotiation with Washington from a position of power. They had made 5 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake: Reaper 22 was not operating without overhead coverage. The RC-135V/W Rivet Joint that had been orbiting at 34,000 feet 40 miles east of the DMZ corridor had been collecting signals intelligence on the KPA Special Operations Force for 17 of the previous 31 days, detecting the anomalous communications discipline, the equipment movements, and the positioning of a ground element in the corridor that was inconsistent with normal KPA border security patterns. The RC-135 crew had flagged the pattern as a probable ambush preparation 11 days before the mission. The information had reached the 161st SOAR Mission Planning Cell. What it had not done, and this was a failure of staff coordination that would be the subject of a classified after-action review for months, was prevent Reaper 22's mission from proceeding. The SOAR crew and the Delta team had launched without full awareness of the probable ambush assessment's implications. But that failure of coordination also meant that when Reaper 22's emergency beacon activated at 3:44 a.m., the RC-135 was already on station, had been tracking the KPA Seizure Force's communications for 90 minutes, and had the complete KPA ground picture available to the emergency response cells within 40 seconds of the crash signal. The second mistake: the 40 KPA operators moving through the tree line toward the crash site were moving toward 6 Delta Force operators who had established a defensive perimeter in the 12 seconds between landing and their arrival. Delta Force's standard SR loadout was not configured for sustained combat. It was configured for reconnaissance and self-protection. What it included, in addition to personal weapons, was a SATCOM radio that was transmitting a flash distress message to the Joint Personnel Recovery Center at Camp Humphreys within 19 seconds of the crash landing, and a communications package that allowed the team sergeant to establish two-way voice communication with the JPRC duty officer at 26 seconds. The JPRC had the team's GPS position, their personnel status, and the preliminary threat picture from the RC-135 feed before the first KPA operator had closed to within 200 meters of the crash site. The third mistake: the 40 KPA operators were not the only element in the field. The KPA Reconnaissance General Bureau had planned for the seizure to be conducted by their 40-man force, which they had assessed as overwhelming for any reasonable American ground element at the crash site. They had not planned for the possibility that the American ground element's quality, tactical skill, and communication speed would result in a defended perimeter, holding for long enough that recovery assets could respond. 6 Delta operators in a prepared defensive position, even with 2 wounded pilots, represented a capability that 40 KPA operators moving through unfamiliar terrain in darkness against NVG-equipped defenders would not easily overcome. The team sergeant's after-action assessment would describe the first contact as occurring at 3 minutes and 40 seconds after the crash. The team's defensive fire, disciplined, sector-assigned, NVG-enabled against adversaries without comparable night equipment, produced a situation that the KPA seizure team had not anticipated: a defended crash site that was not yielding. The fourth mistake: the ZU-23-2 engagement position on the ridgeline. The asset that had brought Reaper 22 down and that remained operational, covering the clearing from above, was a thermal signature. Specifically, it was a thermal signature consisting of 2 crew members and a vehicle-mounted anti-aircraft weapon system sitting on an open ridgeline in 19-degree air that the MQ-1C Gray Eagle unmanned aerial vehicle that had been on persistent orbit over the DMZ corridor since 11 p.m. was tracking with its FLIR sensor as a warm contact of interest. The Gray Eagle crew at their ground control station at Camp Humphreys had been monitoring the ZU-23-2 position since 2:17 a.m., when the thermal signature of the crew settling into their firing position had become distinguishable from the background. They had not yet cleared weapons employment because the position was technically on the South Korean side of the MDL, and the rules of engagement required confirmation of hostile intent before engagement of a contact in the southern limit line area. The ZU-23-2 crew had provided that confirmation at 3:44 a.m. when they fired on Reaper 22. At 3:45 a.m., 61 seconds after the engagement, the Gray Eagle crew received weapons-free authorization and fired 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles at the ZU-232 position. Both impacted. The anti-aircraft weapon and its crew were removed from the battle space. The ridgeline was clear. The fifth mistake, the one that transformed a potential strategic crisis into a comprehensive demonstration of American recovery capability, was the assumption that the response timeline for 8 personnel in a crash site 140 meters south of the MDL would be measured in hours. The KPA's operational concept required that the seizure force reach the crash site, secure the personnel, and move them north of the MDL before any meaningful American response could arrive. The KPA planners had allocated 60 to 90 minutes for this sequence, based on their assessment that the nearest American rapid reaction force at Camp Humphreys would require 40 to 60 minutes to deploy, and that the transit to the crash site would require an additional 20 to 30 minutes. What the KPA planners had not accounted for was the existence of a 48-person Delta Force troop that had been on 2-minute alert at a forward staging position at Camp Casey, 14 miles from the crash site, since 9 p.m. the previous evening, specifically because the probable ambush assessment had triggered a precautionary alert for the operations section responsible for the DMZ corridor. 14 miles. 2-minute alert. 4 MH-60M Blackhawks from the 160th XOR, pre-positioned at Camp Casey's airfield. Alert launch plus transit time to the crash site. 11 minutes. What happened in the next 37 minutes was the most precisely executed personnel recovery operation in the history of American special operations on the Korean Peninsula. At 3:46 a.m., 2 minutes after the crash, the Camp Casey Alert Force received the execute order from the JPRC. The 4 MH-60Ms were turning rotors within 90 seconds. The 48 Delta operators of the alert troop were aboard and lifting off at 3:48 a.m., 4 minutes after Reaper 22's emergency beacon activated. They turned northwest toward the crash site GPS coordinates at maximum speed. The RC-135 had the complete KPA ground picture. 40 operators in 4-man teams. Their approach routes to the crash site mapped from their communications and movement signatures. Their current positions updated every 40 seconds from the SIGINT feed. The RC-135 crew was transmitting the live ground picture directly to the Alert Force helicopters on the tactical net. The Delta Troop commander, headset on in the lead MH-60M, was looking at a digital display showing the positions of 40 KPA operators and 6 friendly personnel in real time as his aircraft closed the 14 miles at 160 knots at 3:52 a.m. 2F-22. And Raptors from the 199th Fighter Squadron at Osan Air Base, which had been scrambled at 3:45 a.m., 1 minute after the crash under the standing alert procedures for a DMZ incident, arrived over the crash site at 30,000 feet. They established a combat air patrol that covered both the crash site and the MDL to the north, their sensors sweeping the approaches for any KPA aviation or fire support assets that might be deployed to support the seizure operation. The KPA's tactical air elements at Hwangju Air Base had been detected by the RC-135, activating their alert procedures at 3:49 a.m., 5 minutes after the crash. The F-22s were between those aircraft and the crash site. No KPA aviation asset crossed the MDL. The 4 Alert Force MH-60Ms arrived over the crash site at 3:59 a.m., 15 minutes after Reaper 22 hit the ground. The KPA seizure force had been in contact with the Delta team's defensive perimeter for 11 minutes. They had not reached the crash site. The terrain, the darkness, the NVG disadvantage, and the disciplined defensive fire of 6 operators had held the perimeter. The team sergeant's position report at 3:58 a.m., 1 minute before the alert force arrived, described the team as fully operational with 2 wounded personnel, both mobile, and ammunition sufficient for continued defensive operations. No team member had been seized. No team member had been captured. The alert force's 48 operators fast roped to 4 positions simultaneously around the expanded crash site perimeter at 3:59 a.m. The operation that followed lasted 9 minutes and 44 seconds. The KPA seizure force, encountering an abrupt transition from 6 defensive operators to 54, 6 original team, plus 48 reinforcements, in darkness with NVG disadvantage on an unfamiliar approach to a defended position, suffered immediate loss of tactical cohesion. 14 KPA operators were secured by the alert force in direct contact. 19 broke contact and moved north toward the MDL under pursuit fire. 7 maintained positions in the tree line and were engaged by alert force elements who had flanked their positions using the RC-135's real-time ground picture. At 4:09 a.m., the team sergeant transmitted all clear to the JPRC. All 8 Reaper 22 personnel, 6 Delta operators and 2 160 SOAR pilots were confirmed recovered and accounted for. The aircraft commander's fractured wrist and the co-pilot's laceration had both been assessed and treated by the alert force's combat controller medic. Both were ambulatory. Neither required immediate surgical intervention. All 8 were aboard the alert force helicopters by 4:13 a.m. The 4 MH-60Ms lifted from the crash site at 4:14 a.m. and turned southeast toward Camp Casey. They landed at 4:28 a.m. All 8 recovered personnel were met by the 161st SOAR commander and the Delta Force troop commander on the flight line. All 8 were assessed by medical personnel at the Camp Casey aid station. All 8 were in contact with their families by 7 a.m. The wreck of Reaper 22, inoperable on the crash site, was assessed as containing sensitive equipment requiring denial. At 4:20 a.m., a 155mm artillery mission from the 210th Field Artillery Brigade at Camp Casey placed 6 Excalibur precision rounds on the wreck with a CEP of less than 2 meters. The wreck was rendered irrecoverable. No sensitive equipment remained intact. The pre-authorized strike package against the KPA Reconnaissance General Bureau's operational infrastructure that had planned and executed the ambush was transmitted to Combined Forces Command at 4:15 a.m. and authorized by the National Command Authority at 4:31 a.m. From Osan Air Base, 8 F-35 A's of the 51st Fighter Wing launched at 4:35 a.m. carrying JASSMER cruise missiles on strike profiles against the KPA Reconnaissance General Bureau's Forward Coordination Facility at Kaesong, the facility that had served as the operational planning node for the ambush, whose location had been confirmed by NSA collection assets 4 months earlier, and the Reconnaissance General Bureau's Signals Intelligence Collection Station at Sariwan that had been monitoring American DMZ operations and providing the targeting pattern data that enabled the ambush to be planned. The Kaesong facility received 8 JASSMERs at 5:09 a.m. Structural collapse of the operations building and the communications annex confirmed. The Sariwan collection station received 6 JASSMERs at 5:12 a.m. All antenna infrastructure in the Hardin Collection Center rendered permanently inoperable. From Camp Humphreys, 16 ATEX EMS Block 2, A missiles launched at 4:37 a.m. against the KPA Special Operations Brigade barracks and staging facility at Pyongyang, from which the 40-man seizure force had deployed, a facility confirmed by NRO imagery as the home station of the KPA unit involved, whose identification had been confirmed by RC-135 SIGINT intercepts of the unit's internal communications during the operation. The Pyongyang facility received the ATACMS salvo at 4:51 a.m. The barrack structures, the vehicle staging area, and the weapons and equipment storage facilities were assessed as comprehensively rendered inoperable. From Kunsan Air Base, 4 F-35Bs carrying GBU-31JDAMs struck the KPA's Border Security Command Post at Panmunjom at 5:03 a.m., the command node that had provided real-time coordination for the seizure operations ground force, rendering it permanently inoperable. By 5:15 a.m., 1 hour and 31 minutes after Reaper 22's emergency beacon activated, the complete response package was executed. The final accounting was documented by Combined Forces Command Intelligence over the subsequent 72 hours. American personnel aboard Reaper 22. 8. American personnel seized by KPA forces at any point. 0. American personnel recovered unharmed or with minor treatable injuries. 8. Time from crash to all personnel recovery confirmation, 25 minutes. Time from crash to all personnel aboard recovery aircraft, 29 minutes. KPA seizure force personnel secured by alert force, 14. KPA personnel who broke contact north of the MDL, 19. Tracked and identified by RC-135 for intelligence purposes. KPA personnel removed from the battle space in direct contact with alert force, 7. KSPA Reconnaissance General Bureau Kaesong facility, permanently inoperable. Sariwon Signals Collection Station, permanently inoperable. KPA Special Operations Brigade, Pyongyang facility, rendered inoperable. KPA Border Security Command Post Panmunjom, permanently inoperable. American aircraft lost, Reaper 22, denied in place by precision artillery. No other aircraft lost. All alert force MH-60Ms undamaged. Both F-22s returned to Osan. All F-35As returned to Osan. American service members having sustained injuries requiring surgical intervention, 0. The aircraft commander's fractured wrist was treated, and he was returned to flight status within 6 weeks. In Pyongyang, the Korean Central News Agency broadcast the morning revolutionary music program at 6 a.m. as it did every morning. No announcement was made about the operation. No announcement was made about the Kaesong facility or the Pyongyang barracks. Kim Jong-un was not seen in public for 7 days. The strategic purpose of the operation, the seizure of 8 American military personnel to be used as political leverage, had produced the following outcomes. 0 Americans seized, 14 KPA operators in Combined Forces Command custody, 4 KPA facilities rendered inoperable, and the complete operational pattern of KPA Special Operations monitoring of US DMZ missions in the NSA's Signals Intelligence Archive for exploitation. The DMZ corridor was quiet by dawn. The MQ-1C Gray Eagle resumed its orbit at 6:30 a.m. The 161st SOAR's next scheduled mission in the corridor was briefed at 9 a.m. It launched at 11 p.m. that night, with an updated threat assessment, and the alert force at Camp Casey still on 2-minute standby. This is what happens when you emplace an ambush for a special reconnaissance mission in a corridor you have been watching for 31 days and do not account for the Gray Eagle that has been watching you for 17 of those days and the alert force that was on standby before your seizure team departed their barracks. This is what happens when you plan to seize 8 American Special Operations personnel and calculate that response time gives you 60 to 90 minutes to move them north of the line, without knowing that 4 helicopters were airborne 4 minutes after the crash and on site 15 minutes after your anti-aircraft gun fired. The team is home. The corridor is watched. It always was.